Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
What we're going to talk about today? Today's Sunday, so it's teaching day, teaching Sunday. Like we have teaching Sundays and example Wednesdays. What we're going to talk about today is the different sorts of feelings of accomplishment we get from the different life forces. I hope it doesn't take too long, but I'm going to read something from a book I'm reading, which is really not about feelings of accomplishment and the life forces, but I wanted to read it for Cynthia. It's a new and rather stunning history of the United States. When I hold that up, does that come off mirror image or correct?
It's okay.
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
comes off correct.
Right, thanks. Anyway, I'm just going to read this. It's a report from a newspaper, October 6, 1787. And that is when the Constitution was being distributed all over the country in newspapers. And this just picks up what was in this newspaper, okay? A Scotsman offered a reward for the return of his stolen chestnut-coloured mare, 14 hands high, lofty carriage trots, and cantered very handsomely. A merchant with a warehouse on Peck Slip wanted readers to know that he had for sale codfish, a quantity of molasses, ground ginger in barrels, York rum, pickled codfish, writing paper, and men's shoes. And the Columbian Almanac was for sale with or without the Constitution as an appendix at the printer's shop, where New Yorkers might also inquire after two people for a price. To be sold, a likely young Negro wench, 20 years old of age. She is healthy and had the smallpox. She has a young male child. The mother was said to be remarkably handy at housework. Her baby was about 6 months old, still nursing. Their names were not mentioned. They were not ruled by reason or choice. They were ruled by violence and force. Between the everyday atrocities of slavery and the latest news from the apothecary, in the newspaper there appeared on page 2 of that day's New York Packet an essay entitled The Federalist, #1. It was written anonymously by a brash 32-year-old lawyer named Alexander Hamilton. Okay, I wanted to read that for Cynthia, and that's the book. Okay. I talk about, I will and won't be talking about each of the life forces, the feelings of accomplishment from each of the life forces being different. I guess I wasn't trying to do this. I just wanted to read that for Cynthia. But I will be talking about the feelings of accomplishment in purpose are a sense of excitement, a confidence, a certain aggressiveness. And I guess I got feelings of accomplishment by taking the risk of reading that quote from the book. Getting directly into this material, there is almost a taste when you can get it, when you can learn it. With the feelings of accomplishment, the FOAs for each of the life forces. And they're different for each of them. If we can locate that different, it can help us. I think particularly in pendulum lows and other times when we are feeling lousy. After all, the life forces, caring, performance, and material only work if we see the difference between them. And we can see those differences in the different feelings of accomplishment. That's the bit I want to present here. So, starting with performance, the feelings of accomplishment and performance are a sense of excitement that my life has meaning. It is a confidence and a certain aggressiveness about it. Yeah, I guess that was, I am going to read this quote, which I just did. That's the performance life force. And if we remember back, the performance life force, after all, starts with the baby and the toddler, feeling and knowing they are the center of everything, okay? The center of attention of the baby and the toddler is, the start of performance life force. The start of the performance life, the toddler running away from daddy in the park, and feeling that's a very exciting thing to do. The feelings of accomplishment in performance are sharp. It's, I won, I'm performing, I am writing, I have power. There is an aliveness in the feelings of accomplishment in performance, which is the sort of aliveness we get from falling in love, which of course is also about caring. Maybe I'll pause between each one, okay? Does anyone want to say anything about that? The feelings of accomplishment we get from performance life force?
What about a sense of like just, because sometimes like if I make something pretty, or if I make just like saying, oh, that's really pretty, and I'm, is that performance or is that material?
Yeah, that's performance.
Okay.
Well, okay. I think that's where it sort of gets interesting in a way, because it could be either, okay? It might well be material. If I'm making that pretty, I've got that set up, I bought those sunflowers to make my home look good, okay? That can be material, and we'll be getting at the feelings of accomplishment about material later. But if it's, I got my sunflowers and they look great, and I want to show them to you, right? These are my Vincent sunflowers. So then it will be more performance, okay? Yeah.
Peter, this is Nan. So if I'm taking pride in it personally, it's probably performance.
I think there's a way that pride, because I presented a paper on pride, I think I mentioned it here, to my philosophy club, which I like to I guess I'd like to get on the forum sometime, Mary, or in a newsletter. Yeah, so pride's something that interests me. I think it'd be almost asking more questions, Nan. It'd be like, yeah, I'm proud of this. Yeah, go back to my little example. I'm proud that I read that quote from the book. That's performance, okay? But I think there's a part of pride, and this is what I got in this paper that I presented. I presented from the point of view that pride often gets a bad press, and in a lot of situations, particularly with foster kids, pride is what gets them through, okay? And then I think pride also has a material life force element to it, because it's it's my home and I'm surviving through hard times and I'm making it look good. Does that make sense? So I guess the way I'd put it, if there's a survival element in it, then it's likely a material life force. But I think the example you presented, yeah, that performance life force, because it's a confidence builder, isn't it? The example you gave, Nan.
Well, I'm just, I don't, sometimes I know what these are simple tools, and I suppose anything simple is scratch the surface, complex. But I'm,
Yeah.
But I'm, there's the, and I know we say this all the time. Let me just say it again. I'm in this place of really appreciating the ability of feelings of accomplishment in a certain life force to ignite kind of movement or productivity in that life force.
Yeah.
And I'm so, and then on a personal note, I'm realized I called last night about this property up the road from me that I've looked at off and on for 15 years. And
wow.
It's sold, and it's sold to a developer for a very cheap price. I wish I would have stayed on top of it. But then I called my nephew and got kind of high talking about creating an urban farm or a therapeutic farm like Nasha has. But I have to watch getting high because I don't want to do something stupid. But I thought, this feels like it's reignited my performance life force.
Yeah.
That was a little dead for a while.
Yeah.
So that small feeling of accomplishment, I've now managed to accomplish other things in my morning.
Well, that's why I think the concept of feelings of accomplishment is so staggeringly useful, because it can do that. It can spark off other ones. Definitely. But a project like that this is where I think the life forces and the feelings of accomplishment from the life forces really work well together, okay? Because we're almost talking about the difference here, just in for the purpose of understanding them, okay? But I mean, in a way, the glory of them is when they work together. And a project like that combines all three, and the way you described it very briefly, all three of them are obviously there. And the part of it where the material life force is so important, and you touched on it when you said, if I had been on top of, right? And when we get to the feelings of accomplishment around performance life force, around material life force, that's one of the things I say about it.
Mhm.
You know, the feeling of being on top of being on top of things. Okay. And yet the audacity to move on the project is performance life force, but the almost deeper motivation, you know, I'm going to make a difference, and I want to make a difference because that makes me a better human being. And that means I care for other people and can put them first. So, you know, there, and I guess another way of looking at the life force is at times one needs to be more of a priority than others. Okay.
You know, just one other comment. When I'm involved in a project, my material life force is right there. I can tell you every dime, every budget figure. When it's about me and my regular life, I got like Zippo of that. But it's interesting to me that I can bring all that material, nerdy life force back into play if it's on something that's stimulated like this.
Yeah, and that goes with the territory of being, you know, mainly or having a propensity toward the caring life force, okay? And it literally happened because a lot of us in the caring life force can be really perceptive about people, okay? That goes with the caring life force, being accurate about people. But we often can't do it for ourselves, okay? We can't do that. We often can't use that skill for ourselves. You know, it just sort of goes with the territory of caring life force. You know, it's when I guess that'd be a session we could have of how do we mess up in each of the caring life forces, okay? And I guess one of the ways we mess up in the caring life force is not always being able to put ourselves first in a simply sensible way that everyone else would be happy with. Yeah. Let me, Cease.
I wanted to come in on this because this is really interesting. And Nan, while we were away on vacation, we watched that movie, Kiss the Dirt. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's a great documentary.
No,
And-
I'll look it up though, thanks.
Oh yeah, I think it's on Netflix. And I have, years ago, I had been part of kind of, I wouldn't call it a commune, we had our own plot of land, 80 acres. Each of us had 80 acres and it never gelled well. And I will be the first to say we didn't know what we were doing, but that gave me, I had the idea would be a sense of purpose and something I wanted to accomplish, but I didn't have whatever skills were needed to, I couldn't make the feelings of accomplishment come true because we didn't have the skills. We didn't have the skills we needed to work together, for one thing. There was somebody who was very much in control, and it was difficult. He had 160 acres, we had 80. So there were all these dynamics, and so we've always had that in the back of our mind as a possibility for the future. But it does, what I was relating to what you were saying, it gave me this, just to watch the movie and think that could be possible, gave me, I don't know what you would call it. It wouldn't really be a feeling of accomplishment because we have it, but it would be it was part of a step, I guess, toward it if we decided to go in that direction, but it wouldn't be the whole thing. And so what I don't know if I have the skills to to accomplish this. And so that's another kind of barrier. But and so I'm thinking we'd need to break it down into smaller steps to have those feelings of accomplishment all the way. It couldn't be like, oh, we got the farm and all this stuff is going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I guess when we've got a project around which we might not have the skill set, that's a time when I think the tools are useful, but we need to make them quite conscious, because if a group of people were going into that project, or if you were going into a project like that, or the project Nan mentioned, if we had the prerequisite material life force skills, because it's land and property and money and that material life force. If we had we just sort of take it for granted, okay? We'd almost take those skills for granted. Someone who's really into the material life force, they know they will be on top of each step. And I guess they will know, just someone who's on top of their material life force, and money gets a bit rough, they'll run to the bank manager. Sadly, some of us in the caring life force, what we do is not open the envelopes, okay? So in a project like that, you need the very solid material life force skills. And I think they'd need to be front and center while the thing is being set up, because it's all about property and money. And if people are going to make the commitment or drop out, which can sort of blow up any, wonderful projects like those, and someone does the figures and says no, or someone talks to their accountant and the accountant says no, they might regret it years later that, why did I listen to that goddamn accountant? I could have had a much richer life.
Yeah.
But if someone's in the material life force, they'll hardly not be able to listen to the accountant. So there are issues there. Let me go on to the feelings of accomplishment in caring. Because in a way they're warm and fuzzy, where the feelings of accomplishment in performance are sharp and aggressive. They're obviously generalizations in the interest of teaching the material. The individual differences in this can be huge. In caring, the feelings of accomplishment are warm, familiar, a sense of belonging, a sense of not being alone. And because of that sense of not being alone, having a certain sureness, quiet sureness. And the caring life force, we are not uncertain about who we are with, and the feelings of accomplishment are sure. That's why, and they're sure and almost taken for granted. It's the sureness that the baby and the toddler and the child had for mommy and daddy's love. And that's why when it doesn't work out, when there's a betrayal or a rejection, we are so thrown by it. And the feelings of accomplishment in caring are, as I said, not being alone and being with someone. Yeah, you know, the other side of that is loneliness, which some of us have in our lives. And that's the part that caring plays with falling in love. You know, falling in love, I think there's a chance I will not be alone. And then if it progresses, there is a certainty I will not be alone. That's what the feelings of accomplishment are like in caring. And that, yes, that's what they're like. And they're, in a way, they're more secure than the feelings of accomplishment in performance, but they are not as sharp. You know, boredom has a danger in a caring life force because we will tend to doubt that which is really secure. Yeah, not understanding feelings of accomplishment. And remember, it's not the same as the accomplishment itself. And I think one of the particularly profound uses of the concept of feelings of accomplishment is in parenting. You know, people can, you know, I'm bored with being a parent. I'm bored with my kids. And rather than saying, well, that's just natural, you know, that can happen. There's nothing wrong with it. There's a difference between the accomplishment and the feelings of accomplishment. So, you know, go make sure you get some feelings of accomplishment somewhere else. Yeah, start a garden or buy a wreck of a vintage car and fix it up. You know, find some ways to get feelings of accomplishment. And there can be a danger for parents of putting the source of all their feelings of accomplishment on the kids. That can be a burden for the kids. And of course, that fits in with the dynamics of underlying purpose. Does anyone want to comment on those feelings of accomplishment and caring?
So like I was thinking about, like, say I did well, like in a classroom, and if if I would get embarrassed if the teacher would like point out in front of everybody that I did a great job, it would be very embarrassing for me, and I'd be worried that everybody hated me. But then there'd be, you know, if a teacher like wrote a little note on my paper that only I could see, is that more caring?
Yeah. There's a certain, you know, it goes with the territory of the caring life force. And when I was talking recently about a deep understanding of each of the life forces, there's a certain way, and it's often a high on the pendulum. This is detail, of not enjoying recognition, not enjoying positive recognition. Yeah. And I guess a really good teacher, sort of out of, you know, professional common sense, will say, okay, let me write a note for little Cynthia rather than make an announcement to the whole class. Yeah, a good teacher will know that. I guess to you know, the purpose of this use of the tools here, you know, partly is, you know, to help us, well, almost at times understand disappointment, okay? Because if our needs are located in caring life force, and we do something like, you know, go to a conference and present a paper and get a lot of recognition for it. And if our need was performance life force, that'd really satisfy it. But if our need is within the caring life force, it won't. You know, we'll, you know, leave that accomplishment. And we got some feelings of accomplishment out of my hypothetical example. But, you know, overall, we leave that accomplishment unsatisfied and don't know why.
Something just this week that had happened, and it was really helpful when you talked about rejectiveness being part of the caring life force, or that's the shadow side of it. I keep talking about Animal Crossing, but there's been a lot that's being worked out. My we now have a third island, but then my spouse is in charge of that, and for reasons, the way it's set up is that the first person who plays is like the resident representative is in charge of the island, and you can't change it without deleting your island. So that's part of why we have it. It's complicated, but anyway, so she's in charge of it, and she asked me, and well, there's one and that island we actually, it's more of our child parts that are playing, and more of our you know, and I have a 9-year-old child part who I thought was mostly about material life force. But it was really funny because she's moved now. She's actually been the one that's been on all 3 islands, and she keeps moving away from people. Okay. and at one point I had a little tiff with my spouse, and it was our child's parts, and she says, well, you know, I just want people to like me, and he says, is that why you keep moving away? I'm like, well, I don't know. Yeah. But anyways, in terms of feelings of accomplishment, we were doing this, and we're trying to figure, because you get a museum, and we're trying to figure out what to do in front of the museum. And my spouse, and now I've done lots of designing and decorating on the islands, and there's one that I'm just alone on. But the one that there, she said, oh, can you do a rose garden? And she drew a picture of what she wanted, and I executed it that day when she was at work. I made the garden, and you know, I didn't want to show it off to the world. And she was really, really happy. In fact, I didn't tell her, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting for her to come home but then she played on one of the other islands and didn't see it for a bit. And when she said, and I got more feelings of accomplishment from her seeing it and saying, gosh, that's exactly what I wanted. That's what I had in mind. And this is really beautiful. And I got a ton of feelings of accomplishment from that. Whereas, you know, so anyways, I was just thinking about all that with, and I ended up, like, I spent the afternoon crying about this when I started figuring. So I really think that this child is much more caring life force than I thought.
Okay. I think that's relevant because, you know, going back to my example of the very good school teacher, who I guess I'm saying intuitively on some common sense level will know this stuff. And I think the school teacher could go through that, okay? You know, I really thought Bobby was, you know, just concerned to be a popular kid. But now I realize there's something more there. And I think I guess the way it would go, you know, Bobby's more sensitive than I thought he was. Bobby can be hurt more than I thought he was. maybe, the teacher teased Bobby in class in a complimentary way, and then all of a sudden realized, hey, that didn't work. That wasn't me at my best, and sort of gives it some thought. And then, if you think of what good teachers are like, and then, that good teacher going to another teacher and said, what do you think about Bobby Roberts? I've just been thinking about him, and this happened in class. And I think, those two teachers, in a way, are drawing on their intuitive experience and wisdom. And I think coming up with stuff that's similar to what we've got. And then the good teacher, just my hypothetical example, take as much worse, Bob, he's, and all of a sudden he's not doing well when he was doing well before. And okay, what's going on with Bobby Roberts? And his parents are getting divorced. It's sort of, because in a way, children are bundles of performance life force, and take material life force, the security of an established home, and caring life force, mum and dad love me and love each other just for granted. They don't think about it. And then all of a sudden, mummy and daddy are fighting all the time. I just wanted to, and that's where the feelings of accomplishment for the teachers, they get on top of that in terms of caring life force, and they're going to feel pretty good about it. They're going to feel pretty good about helping Bobby Roberts through a tough time. That feeling of accomplishment will be very real. Do you want to come in on this at all, Mickey?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay. Tamara, do you want to come in at all? Don't have to, just asking.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
What I'm wondering about is if you're wanting to work with somebody who's a different life force type than you, proportionally, like how can we've discussed this before, but someone who's primarily motivated or needs help like with material life force, what does a material life force person need first and foremost in order to get feelings of accomplishment? And if you want to help that person, how do you do that? I'm caring life force, so I'm always asking for what I also give. But it's been really helpful for me to ask myself what predominant life force the different people in my life are, and what's actually feels. I remember that I think with material life force, it's more recognition of the contribution and accomplishment the contribution that that person has made in a material way. It's respect. Yeah. And if that person with material life force is in trouble, how best to support somebody in their material life force without going into the caring life force, which actually doesn't have the effect that it would have for me, being predominantly caring and also blunted performance. I think I need to work on getting that back in its proper place, because when I think of the balance of that for me, I think the caring has been out of it's been out of because I've internalized a lot of shame. The performance has taken a big hit, and material has just always been weak, unless, like Nan said, there's a sense of purpose other than me getting my own shit together just for me. But if it's for some larger purpose, then I've been told I can be very effective, with executive function. But so that's very interesting too, to wonder how come, like, why, what's with that you can't access for yourself what you actually have skills for, that are evident when it's for a larger project and bouncing off of other people, But anyway, my question is, how does a material life force person ask for and get help from others?
Yeah.
From themselves?
Well, the material life force person will tend not to get help. It won't be automatically easy unless it is help about the material world. Then they will reach out. So I think your first question, in working with them, I think it's important to show respect and ask questions about those parts of their life that are the material life force, okay? Almost, like, what's your job title? And going into almost some detail about their work. One of the, it's not so much true now, because others have caught up with us. That's where I'd say it. But one of the things I'm proud of in contribution training is there's a really clear place for money. It's not secondary here at all. So it's not turning everything into memory links that are about someone's emotional and social life.
Yeah.
And I think a word that can come in there is ambition. And then I think, because I think therapists are often a bit lazy when they don't really know what someone's job is or where they live, what their address is or what their salary is, or what sort of property they own. And the person in the material life force will pick that up, and particularly if it's delivered with a certain superiority, which is one of a flip side of the tendency to doubt ourselves in the caring life force. The flip side of that is a tendency to be really superior, Well, when, and when you get things like something called authenticity is, on top of the pyramid, okay?
Right.
And the way you get authenticity is by doing therapy. Well, other people have different life forces than ours. And so coming back to your question directly, yeah, it'd be getting inside their world, okay?
Yeah.
That's the bit, getting inside their world. And we can do that. In the caring life force, that's within our skill set. It mightn't interest us that much, but we can get inside what someone else's life is like. We can walk in their shoes for a time.
Right. Right.
See,
So it's empathy without
yes,
without the superiority of saying what's important and what's not according to our life force.
exactly. And it's very much keeping in mind the truth line. We've only got a tiny little bit of it. So those of us into therapy don't have it all. So I can get inside what your life is like. Also, people in the material life force are often aware that in some circles they're looked down upon, okay? So they can really appreciate it. Because what the people in material life force need is respect for their material skills and possessions. So it's almost like asking, oh, what sort of a car do you drive? Oh, did you just get a new car this year? Rather than because I'm so sensitive and politically aware and a therapist and don't own a car, literally, except in Italy, I think people in the performance life force often had a sense of other people's snobbishness. And if we can come in from a real empathy, okay, wow, cease. Cease, you're muted.
I want to add on to what you're saying. There's these books out, and I think they're really good about the 6 ways people are reinforced, 6 things that I can't remember the name in a marriage. So some of them might be material things, some might be affection, some might be and then it's important for like couples to look at that. What's positive, for each couple. Maybe it's often quite different. And so having people talk about those things, this brings me joy, but might not bring the other person joy. So them to understand that and to not make a value judgment over what somebody likes versus somebody else. It's just part of their history and how they've been reinforced and what they've done in their life. And so it's more about understanding the other person and themselves so that they can be happy together with understanding what's positive for them. Because, if I think it's food that I want and my husband doesn't want that, it's creating this thing that doesn't even need to be there. So if I can find the name of that.
Is it the 5 languages of love?
That's it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have clients talk about that a lot. You found it useful?
Yeah.
It's an interesting paradigm. I often use it in the beginning of couples counseling.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
It's people on kind of an even keel that we have different needs. So let's look at them and understand them, and we can make each other happier than my ideal of what would make this other person happy. So I think it's a good exercise.
Helpful, yeah.
Peter, you're muted.
Yeah, Cynthia.
Well, I was just thinking about it seems to me the feelings of accomplishment from the material life force are actually almost the easiest to, I mean, I don't, maybe it's just because I have a lot, but they're very clear cut. I mean, you can see it, you can count it, it's not dependent on what somebody else does. It's not dependent on whether somebody likes you. It's not dependent on somebody claps for you and applauds you. You can see, well, okay, I've arranged my books and I'm looking at them and look, they're arranged, I mean, there's a certain amount of, so I would think in a sense, I mean, that it'd almost be almost easiest to work with that in a sense, if that's not your, because it's clear, it's something, it seems to me, I could be wrong, but it seems to me that those feelings of accomplishment are the most, they seem to be the kind that you can actually do by yourself more than some of the others, because performance, if you don't have an audience, well, I guess you can still do it and feel confidence there's an audience somewhere. And caring, you absolutely need somebody else, because if nobody's there, who are you doing it for? But material, it's I can clean my house, I can weed the garden, I can I mean, there, and then I see, oh look, it's clean, it's done.
Mm.
I mean, it might be hard if you're poor, but even then, I think you can kind of do, like I said, there's a certain amount, like, well, for an example, there was when my spouse was in seminary, and they went to places, and one of the things they went to is they went to the projects and stuff like that, and there was this older woman who lived in one of the projects, they were shooting and all stuff, but she had an immaculate house, and she said, this is my home, this is my home, this is my castle, and this is something that I can make nice. Even if the world around me is a mess, I can make this as nice as I can. So, I
Yeah.
guess, and like some people would, when she was a pastor, and they would say something like, particularly in the Black churches and in some of the poorer churches, they says, well, is dressing up, is that sort of a way of discriminating and stuff like that? But he says, no, it's like, it's your Sunday best, and having your Sunday best is something that can give you a sense of pride.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to, maybe I've used this expression in the forum, but I used to make it a bit central in teaching the life forces. If we want to get from point A to point B, someone in the material life force will say, okay, what's the shortest, most direct route from point A to point B? Let's get that established. In the caring life force, we have to go via L and M, because we've got to talk about it. And what are our feelings involved in getting from point A to point B? And if we're in the performance life force, we've got to go through by X and Y, because it's got to be exciting. Okay, it's got to be creative. So there is something, and you can see that. You will have seen this. I'm sure, Cynthia, there are people who are in the material life force who handle divorce. I'm totally sort of triggered by using examples of divorce because I've had them. But I still want to put this out. I think that people in the material life force will often get through a divorce with much less pain than those of us in the caring life force or people in the performance life force. There's something cut and dried about it. Pardon me.
I'm not sure, because one of the things, and it happens more with men, and I think it's part of the thing that men tend to think women as their property. Men were generally easier. I mean, I'm generalizing, and it's not the case, but well, there's two sets of circumstances. But even with women too, people in the material life force, yes, except for if their partner cheats. there's something about their partner cheating that probably because they're mine and they're going to somebody else, and you know that there's a certain possessiveness that, and then you'll get people who will say, well, actually, no, with women, it was different. But yeah, there was. Well, one of the things people who are into, I've always noticed that they're, and maybe I don't know if it happens when you're with a spouse, you tend to, I don't know if people get together with somebody who's stronger in the material life force than they are, or as they get together, they sort of gravitate. But there was usually one person who was much more on top of the material life force than the other, almost always. You know, I used to call them the spender and the saver, you know, and
Okay.
you know who you were talking to by what they said when you did the initial interview. Because you had to do an interview asking their property, asking the stuff. If you were talking to the saver, they could tell you to the penny everything they had, where all their accounts were. They could give you the accounts, and it made a much easier thing for me to fill out my form because they knew everything. You know, when I had to get them their documents, they give me these beautifully organized sense of documents, and it would, and in some ways it was easier. Now, if I was talking to the spender, who would either be in the performance or the caring, you talk to them like, well, I don't know, I think my spouse does that, I'm not really sure. Well, you know, can you give me a document, and give them the documents. If you got anything at all, you get this mess of papers that was like completely scattered. It's like, okay, yeah, I have the and actually, one of the nice things for the material, particularly, it didn't work if you were doing it pro se or for somebody who was really, well, actually really rich people could be more stingy than that, is one of the things that really helped, that would motivate people to get, because you have to get through the emotions to get through the divorce. I mean, it takes, you know, you know, it's not really easy for anyone. The only people who it's easy for are the people who just fell out, I mean, who just drifted apart. If there's no feelings left between them, then those were the easiest cases. But it doesn't matter what life force. I mean, people are, it's messy, and the more they still love each other, the more mean they will be. But you know, there's, and people in material life force don't tend to like change though either, and there's a lot of change, so you know, it's not easy for anybody. The one thing that's easy, the two things that work with material life force, is sitting down with a calculator, saying, this is what it's going to cost you to fight for this, this is the value of what you're fighting for, is this worth it? You know, and then you have people who say, I don't care, I'd rather give it to you than her. Okay. You know, that's you know, then you say, okay, but yeah, I don't know. I think that marriages are, I think, you know, I think love gets complicated, and there's a very fine line between love and hate. So sorry about the digression.
Let me go on to the feelings of accomplishment in the material life force, okay? In a sense, they are unemotional, okay? But I'm saying that from a caring life force perspective, because that's, you know, a great deal of who I am. But the feelings are there, but they are not emotional in the same way in the material life force. I think the difference between feelings and emotions is something I'd like to sort of look at a bit more. But staying on topic, the feelings of accomplishment in the material life force, in a sense, are a solid satisfaction of having the world in order and secure. The physical comfort that this is mine, I own this, and I have control over this, whether it's my home, my career title at work, my library, my car. You know, this is my car. That's a big one for a lot of people. And I think it's a big one for people growing up, their first car. You know, I'm not driving dad's car, I'm driving my car. And within feelings of accomplishment in the material life force, there is a sense of ownership, okay? And at times, and this is where I think the tools can be very useful, although how you ever get them there, I don't know. But in very rough times for people, war, revolution, earthquakes, the feeling of accomplishment comes in from surviving. I did not die amongst the many who did die. And I think there is a feeling of accomplishment there that is very healthily located in the material life force. And I think it's also that place where people who go through those sort of experiences, war, revolution, earthquakes, they often don't, they know that going into the caring life force could be dangerous. You know, why did I survive and others didn't? So I think there's a certain healthiness in the material life force and necessity in the material life force, because it can be about surviving. And I think,
Yes, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
I was just going to say that I think about my OPA, for example, and they're being, well, immigrants, coming in through Ellis Islands. They're that first generation that just lands here from somewhere else, and they're literally called survivors, right? Holocaust survivors. But that the caring life force is viewed with a tremendous amount of suspicion and even rejection or aggression. And it has that thing, like, if you're crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Like that the caring life force might very well make you weak and you won't make it. You won't survive.
Yeah. And I think at times in those circumstances, I think it's a sort of combination of the material life force and the performance life force, which makes up a certain pride that gets people through. And it's interesting, isn't it, the caring life force there, I think, can be dangerous. I think it can weaken people. So, I think that's an example where the tools are simple, but the understanding, sophisticated understanding they can provide in complex situations is very real.
Yeah, so that next generation that happened to be the baby boomers would have been, in my case, as a hippie kid, right? That there was non-materialism, and there was a lot of snobbery about institutions and anti-establishment this and that. Money was not important, and my grandfather felt so ragefully missed, just not got in what his contribution was to the family. and to
Yeah.
understand, only begin to be understanding these things now, maybe because of the pandemic, maybe because of the fears for survival that we were lucky enough to not have in the 70s when I was growing
Yeah.
up in Canada, and it feels like really naive now.
Yes, yes. Because in different ways we live in a time where, yeah, well, we do, don't we? I mean, we stayed at home and didn't go out and obeyed the rules because otherwise we might die. I mean, that has not in any way occurred in my lifetime in that way. And, you know, the debate at the moment, you know, about Afghanistan and everything that's happening there, etc. You know, 3,000 Americans died in the 20 years of Afghanistan. 630,000 Americans died from COVID in the last, 18 months. I mean, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Those figures are sort of staggering. And I get, in terms of feelings of accomplishment, the life forces, I feel a little, I want to be modest about the contribution we can make, but yeah, it did start with a Pellin lift, didn't it? When COVID first came in, because I thought, you know, this has got something to contribute. But to be able to get a head around that, and then, you know, we've been talking about feelings of accomplishment, about performance and material, but, you know, a profound understanding of what those figures mean. You know, 33,000 with all the books and films and words, political controversy about Afghanistan, and 630,000 in COVID. There's going to be, you know, to someone to really get their head around what does that mean? What does that mean for the country? In terms of America, that's going to be someone who's going to have a really healthy, caring life force, okay? You know, because it's in the caring life force that we can, well, for one, passive listen to feedback. And there's going to be, yeah, something we got to contribute there.
Well, I can tell you that seeing people breaking into the Capitol, I wanted those institutions safe and sound. I didn't want anyone tearing them down. And I wanted a lot of material life force people in government to be doing what I figured out how to sit in one place and sit still and wait till I was told you know, that I could get up and move around again. But I didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground. And I just felt like I needed the other life forces to please show up.
Yeah. Cynthia.
We all need each other.
Well, and I think, I mean, because the United States really hasn't in our lifetime had, you know, other places in the world have had coups and had things like this, but there's a certain sense, which is probably a false sense, that, you know, oh, these have lasted 200 years, which is really nothing in history. And, you know, that our Constitution is solid and all this stuff. And I think that there was, and I don't know if this relates to anything, but I thought about this when Tamara was speaking, the fact that that institution was broken. You know, it came back and and so far so good, but the fact that it was breached, it was frightening. It was like the whole world has fallen apart. You know, things that, you know, when I've
Mhm.
had, you know, I'm not super patriotic. I'm not, you know, I know there the United States has a lot of flaws, and I don't necessarily, but there was something that this is something that I didn't think could happen here, and it did. You know, I mean, more than an invasion, more than anything else, the fact that, you know, a sitting president, and I'm still floored. There's people who still are still supporting, uh, you know who, um, the fact that a sitting president could encourage a coup while because he didn't get reelected. I mean, that's just it, it that's something we never. I mean, you know, there's certain things that you think are sure, and when they're broken, it's really, you know, whether I agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. In
Yeah.
fact, it was part of what I knew, you know. So, and maybe we have been spoiled, as you know, in history, you know, 200 years, you know, is not that long of a time, and all governments and institutions have fallen apart. I mean, even in China, where they've had, you know, dynasties that have lasted centuries, almost, you know, this is nothing, but it's still.
Well, I think that's where I think that's where the life forces are useful, because patriotism is another thing, like pride, that gets a bad press. But I think when people see the flag, whatever the flag is, and get, you know, a feeling of accomplishment and a sense of security, because I think you're right, you know, institutions hold. Now, I mean, if you look at the length of human history, we really shouldn't be surprised if our security is fragile. Okay, it's almost like, you know, families. Well, you know, the country of Lebanon. It was a, you know, relatively stable country and had quite a lot of prosperity and a good tourist trade. And all of a sudden, you know, the winds of war come in and it's a wreck. So I think these tools could one of the things I think that the life forces have, and taking it back to marriage and the things you were saying, 5 languages of love, cease. You know, I feel one of the things that we have in the life forces is a plea for tolerance. Okay, you know, for someone in a marriage, the most important thing is expressions of affection. But for someone else, the most important thing is financial security. You know, both with the Pellin life forces, both points of view are valid, and they do not need to be placed in any sort of hierarchy. We can just say people are different, and people within marriages will be different. Yeah, some are spenders and some are savers. Cynthia.
Yeah, well, there's one thing I didn't mention in there. We talked about the spendings and savers. You can tell also who you had by their complaints about the other person. The saver will be, oh, they just spend money all over the place. They don't pay attention. They're selfish about it. They don't pay attention. They're not there. And if you've got the spender, they're like, oh gosh, it's just so controlling.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Wants to know what I do with every penny.
Cease.
I think the difference, though, in what we were just talking about is that with politics, there's somebody else pulling the strings that we don't see. There are forces that we can't even imagine what some of these people are planning. And we don't have any access to it. We don't know what it is. And these have been going on, slavery and discrimination has been going on for hundreds of years in our country. But those forces are still there. They're not going to advertise, hey, we're paying these people off to do such and such, or we're convincing them to act badly. I don't know how much of the January 6th was racist, but there was probably some degree of that there. We're not going to have a free democracy. We're going to be in control. We're not going to let voting rights happen. We're going to control. And did I ever mention that movie, Exterminate All the Brutes?
No. What's it called?
It's Netflix, Exterminate All the Brutes. It's rough. It's 5 or 6 sessions, and it's on Netflix, but it goes back to, I think, like the 12 or 1300s, how white supremacy and white was carried on there, and then went to Africa, went to the US, went to South America. It's rough, but I think it, for me, explained a lot of what has gone on in our country, and there's no reason why it was going to stop now, even with, I don't know what, but I think it's, when we get confused, like, why is this happening? There's a reason for it. We just don't know what it is. It's not just random craziness. And nobody's going to tell you their designs if they're not on a fair thing. So
that's when that's where, and bringing the tools in there, that's where obviously lean over backwards to be fair here, but that's where the material life force on its own can be incredibly scary. And the two of them together, because as you know, I recently went to Sicily, and one of the reasons I wanted to go was, that country has one of the darkest histories. 600 BC, they were creating, great works of art. And they just couldn't stop killing each other. And they couldn't stop it. So I guess the way because there was I don't know the name of it, unfortunately, but there's a documentary that just come out by a guy who's who has ALS, motor neuron disease, and how he's become a spokesperson for activism and hope. He's in a will. He's married with a couple of kids. He can only communicate through, computer setup. I'll dig out the name of that documentary for Wednesday. But he said something I really picked up, and I think I want to make it official. He said his religion is democracy. Okay. And years ago, I used to talk about Pellin as being a spirituality that was about people. A lot of spirituality is about God or about nature. And okay, why can't we have one that's about people? Anyway, he came out and just said, you know, my religion is democracy. And I think that directly addresses what you're saying, Cease. And that's where, you know, we must never let the caring life force die, and we must find ways that it becomes more prominent, because within the caring life force we have transparency. And if we have transparency, then we've got at least a channel where this, even if the secrecy is just recognized as secrecy, that's a start, let alone getting the facts out. Okay. Thank you for coming. We'll have to stop here. Yeah, Wednesday, I want us to bring examples of feelings of accomplishment in these areas. And I'm in Norfolk in England, where it's about 6:30 in the evening. We'll go east to west again. Nikki?
I'm in Wimbledon. Not 6:30, 7:30, I think.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
My typo. Okay, Cease?
Tampa, Florida, and it is 2:30 p.m.
Okay. Nan?
I'm in Cincinnati and it's, it's also 2:30.
Okay. Cynthia?
Cynthia in Illinois, and it is 1:30.
Okay. Tamara?
Mara in San Francisco, and it is 11:30.
Okay. Mary?
I'm Mary in Newport Beach, the same time as tomorrow.
As
Okay.
always.
And again, thank you very much for coming, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Watch this space.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.